The population of the Middle East is growing and its cities expanding. Space for green urban areas is fiercely contested. Private luxury oases and public parks can only be achieved in a compromise with the climate. In these unfavourable conditions, gardens are altogether rare and remarkable. We set out on a journey of discovery to find out how gardens have changed the lives of the people in the megacities and in the desert. We start our journey in Amman, the capital city of Jordan. The population here is expected to double in the coming decade due to the influx of refugees. This is a major challenge, simply in terms of the water supply. Only here in the city district of Jabal al-Webde can a couple of trees be seen. Gardens are the fabled needles in a haystack, tiny and almost impossible to find. In this flood of buildings, city dwellers call even a couple of plants a garden. People from the surrounding countries have found a home in Amman. A few of them created a garden. There are very few places in Amman where it is possible to sit outside. Ramadan has begun, and people withdraw during the day because they are not permitted to eat or drink in daylight hours. This building, dating from the 1970s, and its garden form a single unit, which is now a cultural cafe, an exhibition centre. A garden is a byword for home in a city where people have fled as refugees. Plants have a very special significance for the uprooted. The Jordanian photographer Sami Havan is the initiator of this place, and he explained the thinking behind it to us.
For mankind, most of our harmony comes from nature because it's primitively who we truly are. We're part of the soil, we're part of the plants, and we cannot survive without them.
In a city like Amman, every single plant is full of significance. One special plant is valued above all here. Sami Havan explains why his cultural cafe has the name Jasmine House.
For us, the jasmine plant is a great symbol because its smell inspires passion, it inspires love, and it takes you further away from fear.
Fear is something refugees know all too well. They have frequently left life-threatening situations behind them. In Amman, they find refuge and protection.
A garden helps you feel at home, a garden helps you feel relaxed, a garden helps take away depression, the color green opens your appetite. A garden is the soul of the house.
The Jasmine House people share a common experience of oppression and violent expulsion. This is why they have a sense of solidarity with the refugees who live in giant camps and do not have the good fortune to be in contact with a small natural paradise.
You see, they are living in tents. They have very, very little. They have no water. But then it's very surprising to see every couple of tents, you find that somebody has grown a meter's garden with a few vegetables. And I guess they do that to have something that they can call their own in a way, and something that reminds them of home.
You would scarcely realize on first glance that Amman is one of the oldest cities on Earth. But suddenly, in the midst of this faceless mass of buildings, we discover a Greco-Roman amphitheatre. And on the hill opposite, among the plumbago flowers, are the ruins of a 6th century Byzantine church. It is surely no coincidence that the British governor chose this spot for his residence about a century ago. Today, the governor's house is a part of history in Amman, and it has been included in the Darat al-Funun Cultural Centre. Everything here is stony and dry, but it has still been possible to plant trees and bushes. The only historic garden in Amman can be found on this steep site. It is an oasis of green in a sea of buildings all the colour of sand. Each plant here receives its water from Saudi Arabia. The supply pipeline is 450 kilometres long. Water is more valuable and more expensive than petrol in this city. Whenever it is not Ramadan, like now, a lot of people can usually be found here. In Ramadan, they only come out of doors after sunset. At the moment, only the watchman is here nodding in the shade and can at least enjoy the sight of water, although he can only drink after sunset. In the mid-20th century, Amman was still only a village. It has now grown to 3.5 million because of the influx of refugees over the past decades. Amman is one of the fastest growing cities in the world. If you want to find a garden, you must travel far, to the outskirts of the city. The settlement pressure is enormous. Residential buildings rise one after the other and cover the hills. Old trees must make way for new construction projects, which in turn results in erosion and even more serious drought. These are not easy conditions for young landscape architects. Zina Jaja must not only struggle with climatic conditions, but also with the wishes of her clients for her gardens.
Sometimes also when we have plants that are already there, and for us in Jordan, because it's a little bit hard to plant trees and grow, sometimes the client would not understand that and would ask from us to remove them and put grass instead or lawn. I try to minimize the grass because it's the most expensive element that needs a lot of water, and I try to add a lot of the natural resources that we have in Jordan, like local resources of interesting stone, of even a big diversity of plants that are so beautiful with a lot of colors and seasonal effects. But, of course, thinking of how much water it needs in the garden.
Zina Jaja is committed to ecological gardens, and her aim is to create an environment for her clients that is wild and natural in appearance, rather than artificial.
I remember that my parents and my family, their memories a long time ago was actually to go to the garden and their farm to actually catch and get the food and the fruits and the herbs and the vegetables and cook them with their mothers and their grandmothers and everything. And now, because we started living in an era where everything comes to our house. We have to go to the supermarket and get it, and we don't think that we can have it in our own space. And this is why I try to integrate kitchen gardens wherever possible, even in a meter by meter, to actually let the person connect more with his garden, and so that he understands that if he gave the garden would give back to him.
Zina Jaja was educated at the American University in Beirut, which has its own special approach to garden traditions. Pigeon Rock is a natural coastal landmark of this city, close to the famous Beirut Corniche. Once a wonderful coast, it is today being chopped into portions and developed. the students of the American university have a beach of their own. The campus stretches over a giant 25-acre site. The opportunity to study in a green setting is also a luxury in a European city. The AUB campus is today the only undeveloped site in the Lebanese capital. The university was established by missionaries in the mid-19th century. The city, now one of the most important in the Middle East, was a part of the Ottoman Empire then. Some 8,000 young people study here. Jala Makhzoumi established the Institute for Landscape Architecture a decade ago. She has researched the history of the campus.
In many ways, it is a microcosm of Lebanon and of the Eastern Mediterranean. The terraces created a micro-environment. The trees that are native that they planted became shelter, and nature colonized. Nature took over. As trees died, the soil was enriched, and there were birds and there were all sorts of fauna and flora inhabiting these places, so that it evolved into a beautiful landscape. Eventually, by the 40s and 50s, a lot of the teachers and faculties and Americans brought plants from all over the world.
Because of this great variety, the ecological landscape planning pioneer from Baghdad is seeking to have the campus officially declared a botanical garden. Jala Makhzoumi is a supporter of a traditional garden culture, which in her opinion has survived through until the present. She takes a critical view of the application of modern trends in Lebanon.
What we do now when we landscape a garden, generally they empty the garden to create a place for the lawn. Never. Every single square meter would be planted with trees, preferably, because that is better use of the land. So it's a full garden, not an empty one. Diversity is very important, so not uniformity.
Jala Makhzoumi sent us to Gemaizeh Road in the center of the city. A historic garden should be found here, hidden away among the town cranes and construction sites. From the outside, it looks like a stretch of enchanted jungle in the midst of building chaos. Behind this green wall, the view opens on a historic facade of the type once common in Beirut. The architect Fadlala Daguerre is committed to maintaining the cultural heritage of Beirut.
Our family is in Beirut, has been in Beirut for 300 years now, 350 years actually. And what I know of this house is that around 1840, my family had a silk factory on this land. And this is why we have still some mulberry trees around, because the mulberry trees were used for the silk factory. And most of the houses that were built at that time were houses around a central hall, which is called the Beiruti house. And today we call it the Lebanese house. And all these houses had gardens around, gardens that were to be enjoyed, and of course to be useful with fruit trees, flowers, etc. 100 years ago, people used to spend the summer just in Ashrafiyya, which is in the center of the city, because Ashrafiyya was a garden city, actually, small houses surrounded by gardens all around. The urban expansion today has changed this, and the climate is changing with it, unfortunately. Houses that were really making the core of Beirut are in danger today. Most of those houses have disappeared because of the urban expansion of the last 50 years. And mainly after the war and the reconstruction process, many of those houses were destroyed then. And of course, the gardens disappeared as well. At the same time, the disappearance of gardens affects the climate. As you can see, coming from the street inside our garden, you feel the difference in temperature. And the comfort we are experiencing here, you don't experience it on the street.
We leave this oasis a little unwillingly. Beirut is everywhere, clearly in the grip of a very rapid construction boom, as the city recovers from the damage of the past civil wars. Ruined buildings still recall the war. There is no green infrastructure in the city. But we find an inviting place to linger, a public square in the historic centre. Here you can sit in the shade under inviting fig trees and listen to the murmuring of water. The landscape architect Vladimir Jurovich received international recognition for his Samir Kassir Square.
This was one of the first public spaces in the city because, as you notice, in Beirut, we don't have many public spaces, we don't have many parks. We used to have, but during the whole 25 years of civil war, and after that, there has not been a lot of emphasis given to that. So we've tried to really do a small special garden for the people of the city to enjoy and just be there.
Even here, you can't get away from the Beirut past. The sculpture is a memorial to the journalist Samir Kassir, murdered in Beirut in 2005. This is a later addition to the garden and gives it a new, sad note. Vladimir Jurovich referred to living witnesses of the past in his planning work.
It had these two very large ficus trees that the clients wanted us to take out because ficus trees, their root system is very invasive and can tear up pavements and anything that we do. And when I visited the site and I saw those trees, I went back to the client, I said, if you're planning to remove the trees, I will not do the project. I can incorporate them. And so we started by elevating 1.5 meters. So if you see the wooden deck is a way to allow the roots to stay down, allow the air to go in, the rain to go in, and never to have... So I've ticked that box with the client in order to conserve those two trees that have witnessed everything that happened in Beirut. And I mean, of course, you wouldn't touch.
We leave Beirut behind us and drive up towards the mountains, where wealthy Lebanese have their gardens designed by Vladimir Jurovich. The city is sprawling rapidly up here. Houses are being built high up in the mountains. The ruins of a Roman temple tend to be no more than an obstacle in the way of expansion plans. You might imagine yourself in a natural maple forest if it were not for these reflecting spheres. The garden belongs to the Lebanese fashion designer Elie Saab, who built a retreat, but also a place for conviviality up here at 2,000 meters above sea level. The garden designer had to bring in as many uses as possible into a small area.
If you want, the main goal of these gardens, where with the layout that you mentioned is indeed very designed and architectural and clean, and it's really trying to capture the distant views beyond the horizon, where at the top of these mountains it's still quite pristine and unbuilt, and we wanted to somehow offer that and somehow highlight that and bring it to the foreground, so that when they are in these spaces, hopefully they can relate to that a little bit, which we're losing completely in Lebanon now. And on the other side, being in this, troubled place in a way with all the wars and everything we've gone through, and seeing what happens, the complete devastation of all the natural heritage, of what made Lebanon beautiful, the oak forest, the pine forest, the cedar groves. And that somehow is fueling you to design, with a lot more respect towards nature, and every tree has so much meaning, and every view has so much meaning, and every plant does so much, and I think that has really affected me a lot.
The last garden we visit in Lebanon is in the center of an intact pine forest. This background scenery is the true glory here. The garden simply blends in with complete simplicity and grace, like an act of homage to nature. It is plain that the owner is a passionate art collector. Work by the greatest contemporary talents is assembled here. The rose terrace is like a flower room in a landscape garden, a contrast to nature. Thousands of hydrangeas line the route through the newly planted pine forest. In other places, trees have to give way to the garden, but here additional trees are planted. The pine forest can re-establish itself on the entire area. The proprietor was able to purchase the surrounding forest plots, and by doing so, saved them from destruction. There is no lack of water in the mountains, and here it benefits nature and not new development areas. In Lebanon, we became aware of how nature can also be a victim of war, and how every tree and every plant has its own significance, as Vladimir Jurovich said. We set out again, this time 1,500 kilometers to the southeast, to Riyadh on the Arabian Peninsula. We are searching for green locations in the desert. After the rainfall in winter, the desert blooms, and a perfumed carpet of flowers sprouts from the sand and the stone in a matter of days. This is the time of superabundance for grazing camel herds. Saudi Arabia is 6 times the size of Germany. Much of its land area is desert. It is a landscape of aridity and drought. Although its rock formations have been shaped by water. Heavy rainfall is unable to soak away into the subsurface and can rage as sudden storm torrents through canyons such as these in low-lying areas. The desert plants have adjusted to these conditions. They cover the desert with scrub in spring, lending it a green sheen. The thorny burnet, a relative of the rose, and the saltbush are survival specialists. And so too is this hardy sorrel variety with its red flowers. If the desert is to be made greener, then people must lend a helping hand. These irrigation pipes in the Tumama Park, a 2-hour drive from the capital city, Riyadh, are used in a scientific research planting project. The German landscape architect Jens Boerdeker has long been at work in Saudi Arabia and knows the hopes behind this project.
Why are we doing all of this? The Riyadh region is as big as Germany, and the plan is to re-establish natural vegetation. The questions here are which areas are suitable for planting and what is the most effective way to achieve this. We have tested various planting methods for establishing a plant in the desert with as little water as possible.
Lars Wickelhaus explains the details to us.
Here we have root-deep irrigation, which can be seen very nicely here. Compared to the other methods, it stays down. We have free space here and it reaches to the roots. For example, with this plant. In principle, there are a number of possible irrigation methods, and they are all being tried out here. These are all plants that can be found here. They are native acacia species. Consistently, those acacia types with a natural habitat in Saudi Arabia. We don't bring in any from abroad.
The research results will also be valuable for Jens Berdeker, since he constantly asks himself, with what kind of plants can he work in the climate here? The greening of the desert is a dream, and each plant, each green shoot, helps to sustain it. Green ribbons constantly move through the desert. These are the wadis, river valleys, through which the rainwater flows. In the center of the desert lies the capital city, Riyadh. Riyadh is a large modern city of 5 million inhabitants. The growth rate is explosive, around 10% a year. Construction sites follow one after the other. The city is busy and has an optimistic atmosphere. The horizon is dominated by skyscrapers. The city is edged with numerous new residential districts. The mountain plateau on which Riyadh is built is bisected by the Wadi Hanifa river valley. During the period of the fastest urban development, the wadi was long ignored, but today it has been recultivated and is playing an important role in the city development plans. Here in the desert, it is a luxury to be able to live and relax close to water. And the facilities here are used intensively by the people of Riyadh. Water management is the first priority for the city, Badra Tamimi told us.
The city is consuming around 2 million cubic meter per day, and this water goes around to the ground, doesn't penetrate through the rocks, and it goes to the lower part of the city, which is Wadi Hanifa.
There are contradictory images in Wadi Hanifa, dry earth all around, but with large-scale dams stretching across the valley. The plants show that there must be water. Heavy rain is frequent, and trickles of water here then turn into raging rivers. It is important to be prepared.
We try to make networks of channels to collect this water and try to raise the quality of this water by creating weirs, by creating bioremediation facilities, try to use any environmental advantage in order to raise the quality of water.
When good, clean water is available, the prerequisites exist for establishing parks and recreation areas.
Once we got the water, we try to build the parks. People try spending so much time during the weekend in order to escape the city, to come all over the wadi and having a good time with the family. Yeah, I go from time to time. Of course, I'm working there, but I still enjoy with my family.
One of these recreation areas in the wadi is close to Diriyah. It is the town where the Saudi royal family originates and has historic adobe architecture. This is a popular weekend excursion destination for the city people, on Friday afternoons and Saturdays. Sitting out of doors is more than a mere leisure activity for the Saudis. Despite the city environment, they are still proud to see themselves as a tough desert people who enjoy the outdoor life. The modern developments in the Wadi Hanifa River Valley help them to cultivate this image. The park includes some marked-off areas. Saudis come with their families and want to be private. Like the own carpet, these boxes provide a certain privacy in a public space. It is not only in Wadi Hanifa that greenery can be found. An entire city quarter is also astonishingly green, with its shaded palm alleys and lush, colourful plants. This is the Diplomatic Quarter, a garden city to itself. A network of parks make it possible to take walks, with the interconnected garden facilities never more than a 5-minute walk away from the next one. The Diplomatic Quarter is the showpiece Saudi Arabia created in the 1970s to demonstrate the modernization and opening process in the country. The Foreign Ministry moved to Riyadh, and all the embassies followed. An 8 square kilometres area was reserved for this new quarter, designed with international flair, which was also to include modern gardens. The gardening know-how was not available in the country, and for this reason, a group of German architectural offices was commissioned with the planning. The first step towards implementation was the creation of a tree nursery. The young trees were given time to grow even during the planning and construction phases. The population of Riyadh no longer benefits so much as it did previously from the extensive parks. Since 9/11, the quarter, with its many foreign embassies, is under strict surveillance, and only people with business in the Diplomatic Quarter are permitted to enter it. As a result, the atmosphere in the parks is similar to that in this embassy garden. It is a beautiful but cool security zone. The Tuwaiq Palace has a special feature. Situated on the heights overlooking the Wadi Hanifa, it was originally planned as a meeting place for diplomats. As in the surrounding gardens, it is a place where tradition encounters internationalism. The modern design was provided by German architects, who used an Arabic caravanserai as a reference pattern. The enclosed park and the shaded fountain under a colourful tent awning are enjoyed today by the residents of the guest house and the employees in the leased offices. Building sites overlooking the Wadi Hanifa are much sought after for villas and gardens. One of these gardens is spread below this old fortress tower. It is in a side canyon of the Wadi with fertile soil. The houses which look down on the garden are occupied by 2 generations of the family that owns it. Jens Berdeker, whose bureau planned the garden, explains that the homes were added to the garden later.
Here the garden is built first, and then the houses follow. This happened in the case of this garden about 15 to 20 years ago. At that time, this was simply a canyon and nothing else. We did the planning. As landscape architects, we first decided with the client where the houses would be and what effect it would have on the garden. The garden was created, and then 10 to 15 years later, the houses followed.
The garden today is mature with tall palms and olive trees. The design concept is entirely in line with local tradition.
What we see is a kind of farm, conceived to the pattern of traditional farms, with irrigation channels, palm trees, and a sunken area in the centre where we have the grass area, and which is cooler in summer because of water evaporation. And it is a pleasant place to sit and enjoy the garden.
Und genießt sozusagen den Garten.
This lower area is also the best place to enjoy the perfume of the many flowers that surround it in spring. It is a variety of acacia.
Süße Akazie riecht sehr schön, ja? Süßlich. Und in Frankreich,
The sweet acacia has a wonderful and somewhat sweetish scent. It is used in France to make perfumes. The bark and the seeds can be made into glue. The plant is now quite established, although not originally native to Saudi Arabia. We started to test plants about 30 years ago, and this plant proved to be very suitable. It flourishes here and naturally has a strong influence on the appearance of a garden like this.
kommt hier sehr gut klar. Und sie bestimmt natürlich das Bild jetzt hier in so einem Garten.
The bare frames of the floodlighting pylons project above the trees. Nightfall is very swift close to the equator. The garden is mostly used in the cool evening hours, and Saudis are not fond of a dark garden and prefer to have it brightly floodlit. Coolness and shade are the most important attributes of a garden. The period from June to September is hot, well over 40 degrees. This is when the garden comes into its own as the family meeting place.
Sie treffen sich jedes Wochenende. Ja?
They meet here every weekend.
Familie zusammen.
The whole family comes together with 20 or 30 people, sometimes more, sometimes 100,
Manchmal auch noch mehr, manchmal
and they spend the weekend together.
und die verbringen dann das Wochenende. Die Gesellschaft
Society here is a tightly knit unit.
kennt das Land.
I have known this country for over 30 years, but it is still a riddle or a secret to me how society works here.
Wie die Gesellschaft
I have a great many Saudi friends, but you are never invited into the family circle.
man wird in diesen Kreis
It is quite simply a closed unit.
geschlossen.
The guest house is also a little off the beaten path. Private life is greatly valued in a Saudi family. Riyadh creates public green spaces for its many citizens who do not have one of their own, and this is a new development for society here.
On Fridays, we sleep late and then go to the mosque. We then prepare everything in the kitchen for a picnic. Juice, water, some food and blankets to sit on. I make sure we have everything my son will need.
And what about me?
Yes, my husband and I, we do it together.
Almost a third of the Saudi population is under 25 years of age. The parks are important places for children and teenagers.
We are brothers, cousins, uncles. We meet once or twice a month, but we are not all from a single family.
Each family secures a place and they sit together. If you look closely, you can see the blankets they use have patterns like carpets. The highlight is the picnic. The families have brought it along in large baskets, and the food is passed around on plates. The men and women are mostly together, but groups of women only can be seen too. They often withdraw into an area of the garden where they can enjoy the green surrounding undisturbed.
We love nature, the atmosphere, the plants, and the cleanliness of the place is important for our family meetings.
A system of parks extends through the centre of Riyadh. The former government headquarters, the Moraba Palace, is today the National Museum. What was once reserved for the royal family is now open to the public. A park stretches between the buildings where an especially precious commodity is to be found: water. Something that is so attractive for children everywhere is even more so for those playing in a desert city. A water playground makes them wet and happy. Saudis are a minority in Riyadh. This is because their city needs hundreds of thousands of guest workers who come here from other Arab countries or from Asia. They all meet here. The hustle and bustle on the broad square in front of the National Museum continues until the late evening and the night hours. The entire area is as bright as day with the floodlighting from giant pylons. The Arab world is in a state of social change. Public spaces and green meeting areas are playing a role in this. We continue our journey to the northwest, crossing the Red Sea to Egypt and its capital city, Cairo. Cairo is a byword for a giant city with no open spaces, and the green space available to each of them is about the size of a footprint. Or at least, it was. The buildings date back to the Fatimids, who made Cairo their capital city at the end of the 10th century. Cairo's old city, with its rich Islamic cultural heritage, had long fallen into decay. It was only after Karim Aga Khan began to restore some historic monuments that a change of attitude set in. The residents should have a share in the changes. Dina Bakoum has worked for a number of years in Darb al-Ahmar and sees one of her tasks as involving local people in the changes.
One of the things and the ways that we try to involve people in the project is really to have them work with us in the project, you know. So they come and they get some jobs with us, especially for craftsmanship from the neighborhood, those like carpenters who exist here in the neighborhood, and we ask them to work with us. We started with the facades, and they really saw progress going on, and they started to see the decoration and this beautiful carvings and colors appearing on the facade, and they started to really appreciate the efforts being done in this mosque.
People enjoy use of a public open space, and no one asks whether it was a Sunni, a Shia, or a Coptic Christian who was behind it. The Ismailis are a Shia community, representing a small minority amongst Muslims. The majority of Muslims are Sunnites. Karim Aga Khan, a Shiite imam, commissioned the restoration of Sunnite mosques, a symbolic act of tolerance and pluralism. There are no Ismailis living in Cairo. Improving the quality of life for the poorest, irrespective of their beliefs, is the mandate of the Imam. A giant 500-year-old rubbish dump in the centre of Cairo's old city. Over 1 million cubic metres of waste and rubbish accumulated through centuries needed to be dug up and transported away. In 2005, the Al-Azhar Park opened in the centre of the old city of Cairo. But a lot of time passed before the opening. Years passed before it was possible to establish the first healthy plants in Al-Azhar Park. As a result of the 500-year-old rubbish dump, the quality of the soil was so poor that all plants died at the latest after 2 days. The botanist El Sadi Mohammed Badawi is the chief gardener, and he made the first frightening soil analyses in 1994.
All the plants had been cultivated in the origin soil, had been burned in 2 to 3 days. Burned, totally burned, dead. Then there was a shock for us. And then after the mixture of the different soils, we saw some progress and then improved itself.
Today, all the seedlings are grown in the garden.
Choosing the team is very important, so that we have chosen our team, very strong people, very helpful people. We also are endemic. They are thinking that this project is their project. That is our baby. We are looking for to keep our baby in good health and in very good conditions, yeah.
The Al-Azhar Park is bordered to the west by the medieval city wall, over which only a few decades ago people used to dump their rubbish. Today, the people behind the wall are still poor, but they now live in the most attractive part of historic Cairo.
When we look to the surrounding area, it's very poor people. They don't have any green location at this area or surrounding because they are poor, they can't move, they can't drive, they have no cars to drive to outside or so. Then this was a chance for them to get such greenery.
The Al-Azhar Park is the result of 20 years of hard work. The $30 million costs were borne by the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. Today, the park must pay its own way, with the entrance money paid by 2 million visitors every year. The bottom line was a question posed by the Aga Khan, the spiritual leader of the Ismailite Muslims and a philanthropist. How do the people of Cairo spend their leisure time? The park has changed Cairo for the better and improved the living conditions for the ordinary people. In a megacity such as Cairo, a public garden opens the door to another world. One in which everyone can have an equal share in the luxury of fragrant flowers, the shade of trees, and cooling fountains. Quite simply, a corner of paradise for everyone.